Welcome to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button so you don't miss any more shocking and captivating stories. Enjoy watching. Ethan Miller wasn't supposed to be there. That was the first thought that crossed his mind as he stood just inside the ballroom of the Franklin Hotel, adjusting the collar of his jacket and scanning the room like someone who had wandered into the wrong life. The space glowed with soft gold light, crystal chandeliers hanging low over round tables, dressed in white linen. People laughed easily here. They hugged, clinked glasses, leaned in close to hear one another over the soft jazz band playing near the stage. This wasn't Ethan's world. He was an IT project manager, more comfortable in quiet offices and predictable schedules. Charity galas were something his wife attended, not him. And yet, here he was. 3 hours earlier, he'd been sitting at home in sweatpants, scrolling aimlessly through his phone, when Laura's text had come through. "Hey, I know this is super last minute, but if you're not too tired, you could come to the Hope for Tomorrow fundraiser tonight. Starts at 7. I'd really love it if you were here." That was unusual. Laura Miller planned everything weeks in advance, her charity events especially. She was the director of outreach for a nonprofit focused on housing assistance, work she took seriously and talked about constantly. But she rarely invited Ethan, said it wasn't his scene, said he'd be bored, said it was mostly networking. So when the invitation came late and soft, almost hesitant, it stirred something uncomfortable in his chest. Still, he hadn't planned to go. But then he noticed something else. The text had come from Laura's phone, but without the usual heart emoji she always added. Small thing. Meaningless, probably. Except Ethan had begun noticing small things more often lately. Like how Laura had started taking her phone into the bathroom. Like how she'd changed the password on it for work security. Like how she dressed differently now. Less familiar, more deliberate. He told himself he was being paranoid. He showered, put on his navy blazer, drove downtown. And now, standing at the entrance, he felt the faint but unmistakable sense that he had walked into a story already in progress, one where his role hadn't been written. He looked for Laura. She wasn't hard to find. Laura stood near the stage, radiant in a deep emerald dress he'd never seen before. Her hair was styled differently too, looser, softer. She was laughing, her hand resting lightly on the arm of a tall man in a tailored gray suit. The man leaned close as if he had every right to. Ethan froze. The sight wasn't dramatic. No kiss. No obvious line crossed. Just proximity, comfort, familiarity. Still, something twisted in his gut. He watched as another man, older, silver-haired, holding a microphone, approached them. He said something Ethan couldn't hear. Laura laughed again, that same laugh she used to reserve for him, and squeezed the gray-suited man's arm. Then the host raised his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man said, voice amplified through the room. "Before we continue, I'd like to personally thank one of our key supporters tonight." Applause rippled politely. "Marcus Reed," the host continued, gesturing toward the man beside Laura. "Not only for his generous contribution to our cause, but for his unwavering support of the incredible woman standing next to him." The host smiled at Laura. "And of course," he added warmly, "thank you for sharing her with us tonight." Laughter. Light. Casual. Friendly. Laura laughed too. Ethan felt the words land like something sharp sliding under his ribs. Sharing her. He waited for Laura to correct him. To say "my husband is here," to glance around the room and spot Ethan standing there like an idiot. She didn't. Instead, she leaned closer to Marcus Reed and said something that made him smile. Ethan's hands curled slowly into fists. No one in the room seemed to notice him. He wasn't introduced, wasn't acknowledged. He might as well have been invisible. He forced himself to move. Step by step, he crossed the room, each footfall heavier than the last. His mind raced, trying to assemble excuses for what he'd just heard. It was nothing. A misunderstanding. A joke taken out of context. She was just playing along for donors. That's what supportive spouses thought. That's what trusting husbands believed. But trust, Ethan realized, required participation from both sides. Laura finally noticed him when he was only a few feet away. Her smile faltered. Just for a second. But it was enough. "Ethan," she said, surprise sharpening her voice. "What are you doing here?" The question cut deeper than any accusation could have. "You invited me," he said quietly. She glanced at Marcus, then back at Ethan. "Oh, right. I didn't think you'd actually come." Marcus extended his hand, confident, relaxed. "You must be—" "Her husband," Ethan said before the man could finish. The word hung between them. Marcus blinked, then smiled, though something in his eyes shifted. "Ah, of course. Nice to finally meet you." Finally. Ethan shook his hand. It was firm, familiar, like a man who had done this before. Laura cleared her throat. "Marcus is one of our major sponsors." "I gathered," Ethan said. An awkward silence followed, filled only by the distant music and the clink of glasses. Laura touched Ethan's arm. "I'll catch up with you later, okay? I just need to—" She gestured vaguely toward the stage, toward Marcus, toward everything that suddenly felt like it was happening without him. Ethan nodded. "Sure," he said. He walked away before his face could betray him. He didn't leave the event. Not yet. Instead, he stood near the bar, untouched drink in hand, watching his wife move through the room with a confidence he barely recognized. Watching the way Marcus stayed close. Watching the way people spoke to her, as if she belonged to something larger now, something he wasn't part of. That night, Ethan didn't confront her. He did something far more dangerous. He started paying attention. And once he did, he realized this wasn't a single evening. It was a pattern. And he was already late to it. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, uneven circles, listening to Laura's breathing beside him. She slept easily. Too easily. One arm flung across the bed, her phone face down on the nightstand, like it had something to hide. He told himself not to reach for it. He didn't trust himself if he did. Instead, he replayed the evening again and again, dissecting every look, every word, every omission. The host's casual joke, Marcus's finally, Laura's surprise, not delight, at seeing him. None of it screamed affair. But together, it formed something worse. A life she hadn't bothered to tell him about. In the morning, Laura moved through the kitchen with practiced normalcy. She made coffee, checked her email, kissed him on the cheek like she always had. "You were quiet last night," she said lightly. "Long day," Ethan replied. She studied him for a second as if deciding whether to push. Then she smiled and turned back to her phone. That smile stayed with him all day. At work, Ethan found himself staring at code without seeing it. He reread the same email 5 times. His coworkers joked about a server outage, and he laughed, half a beat too late. Around noon, he did something he never thought he would. He searched Marcus Reed. It took less than a minute. Marcus Reed was a venture capitalist specializing in social impact investments. He sat on the boards of 3 nonprofits. He donated heavily. He appeared in photos, many of them, including several with Laura. Ethan scrolled slowly, carefully, like touching something fragile. There she was at a charity brunch 6 months ago, a gala in Chicago, a ribbon-cutting ceremony, always standing close to Marcus, always angled toward him, always glowing. The captions referred to her as Laura Bennett, her maiden name, not Laura Miller. Ethan felt his throat tighten. That evening, he didn't say anything. He watched instead. Laura stayed late at work, said they were prepping for another fundraiser. When she came home, she smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't his. He didn't accuse. He adapted. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a quieter version of himself, more observant, less reactive. He asked neutral questions, logged dates, noted patterns. Laura now had donor meetings twice a week, always in the evenings, always downtown. She dressed carefully for them. Heels, dresses, jewelry she hadn't worn in years. Once, he casually asked, "You ever meet with donors during the day?" She didn't look up from her laptop. "Some of them are only available at night." Another half-truth. Ethan noticed the way her phone lit up with notifications she never opened in front of him. The way she turned the screen away. The way she stepped outside to take calls. He didn't need access to her phone to know something was happening. What surprised him most was not the suspicion. It was the grief. He mourned the version of his marriage he thought he had. The quiet evenings, shared jokes, the belief that fidelity was assumed, not negotiated. Every laugh Laura shared with someone else felt like something stolen from a joint account. One Friday night, Laura said she'd be gone overnight. "Out-of-town fundraiser," she explained. "I told you about it." She hadn't. Ethan nodded anyway. After she left, he sat alone in the living room, lights off, the house unfamiliar without her. Around midnight, he checked her nonprofit's event calendar. There was no fundraiser listed. His hands shook, not with anger, but with clarity. The next morning, Ethan drove downtown. He didn't know what he expected to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. The hotel parking garage was half full. He walked through the lobby like a man entering enemy territory, scanning faces, checking reflections in glass. Then he saw her. Laura stood near the elevators, wearing jeans and a soft sweater. Not fundraiser attire. Casual, intimate. Marcus stood beside her, his hand resting easily at the small of her back. They laughed. Then, without hesitation, Laura leaned in and kissed him. Not quickly, not guiltily, comfortably. Ethan didn't move. Time slowed into something thick and heavy. He noticed absurd details. The hum of the elevator, the smell of polished stone, the way Marcus's hand tightened slightly, as if it belonged there. No one noticed Ethan, just like at the gala. He turned and walked out. In the car, his chest finally caved in. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white, breathing shallow, forcing the pain to stay contained. He didn't cry. Not yet. Crying felt like permission. That night, Laura came home cheerful. "It went really well," she said, tossing her bag down. "We raised more than expected." Ethan looked at her, really looked. "You ever plan on telling me?" he asked. She stiffened. "Telling you what?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Forget it." He went to bed early. From that night on, Ethan stopped wondering if. Now he needed to know how long, and more importantly, what he was going to do about it. Ethan didn't plan to confront Laura immediately. Not at the gala. Not at the elevator kiss. Not even when he had the first photographs, taken with a long lens from his parked car outside a boutique hotel, showing Laura laughing against Marcus Reed's chest, his hand resting in that same familiar, intimate place. It wasn't just jealousy. It was something colder, sharper, proof, evidence, reality he could no longer ignore. For weeks he had built his case quietly. Calendar entries, inconsistent stories, late-night meetings, text messages glimpsed over her shoulder. Patterns. They were all there. And the more he watched, the more he realized that this wasn't a temporary lapse. Laura hadn't slipped up. She had been constructing a parallel life, a life that excluded him entirely. One Tuesday evening, Ethan returned home early from work. He told her he had a client meeting, but in reality, he wanted to see if her schedule lined up with what she said. Laura was home, laptop open on the dining table, a glass of wine by her side. "Hi," she said brightly, looking up. "You're early." "Yeah," Ethan said, sitting down across from her. "I wanted to go over something." Laura tilted her head, curious. Oh, about work? No, he said, steady now. About us. The words hung between them like smoke. Laura's expression shifted slightly. Alert, cautious, almost imperceptibly guilty. Ethan placed a small stack of photographs on the table. He didn't speak at first. He watched her eyes scan the images. Dinners at upscale restaurants, trips to nearby cities, hotel rooms with the door number visible. Each one showed her with Marcus Reed. Each one told the story she had been hiding. Laura's hand twitched toward them, then stopped. Ethan, she started, her voice faltering. He cut her off. You've been lying to me. About everything. About where you go, who you see. Even about your name in public. You've been presenting yourself as someone else entirely. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again. It's complicated. Complicated? Ethan's voice rose, but still measured. You've been seeing him for months. Well, I thought we were a team. Well, I thought we had a life together. Complicated is calling the Titanic a little wet. Laura swallowed. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean to? Or you didn't care? Ethan asked. His hands were shaking slightly, but he forced himself to stay seated. I tried. I tried to trust you. I looked the other way when I wanted to see the good in you. And this is what I get. Laura's eyes filled with tears, but Ethan didn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. He felt the weight of betrayal, the slow, grinding loss of the life he thought he had. You're going to leave him, he said quietly. Right? She shook her head. I don't know, Ethan leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. You don't know. That's your answer? You don't know if you want your marriage or if you want him. I love you, she whispered. Ethan laughed, short and bitter. Love? You call this love? Sharing yourself with someone else while pretending to be married? Laura looked down. She didn't answer. Ethan reached across the table and picked up a printed email he had saved. One from Marcus Reed, casually discussing a weekend trip with Laura, asking about her availability. The subject line read, Looking forward to seeing you. Do you see this? Ethan said, sliding it across the table. You were planning a weekend getaway, while I thought we were planning our life together. Do you see how it looks to me? Or is your version of love so selective that I don't count? Laura flinched, but stayed silent. You made your choice, Ethan continued. I waited. I watched. I tried to believe in you. But this ends tonight. Laura's face crumpled. Ethan, please. He stood. He felt a strange clarity, a sense of finality he hadn't known he could summon. Don't. Save it. I've already decided. You've been living a lie and I'm done being a part of it. Ethan moved to the bedroom, packed a small bag, and left it on the bed. Laura watched silently, tears streaming, phone in hand, likely to call Marcus, but he didn't care. I want a divorce, he said simply. You can keep the house. You can keep the money you've been spending on him. I don't care. But you're done with me. Done lying. Done pretending. Done being the woman I thought I married. Laura's voice was small. Ethan, you can't just... Yes, I can, he interrupted. And I did. He walked out. The door clicked behind him. In the quiet of his car, Ethan finally let himself feel the anger he had restrained for so long. But the anger quickly cooled into something sharper, calm, deliberate. He had been wronged, but he also had control now. The next morning, he did something subtle but pointed. He forwarded a copy of the photographs and emails to the board of the nonprofit Laura worked for. He didn't write a word, only attach the files. Within days, Laura was suspended from her position pending an investigation. Her professional reputation, one she had built painstakingly, was shaken. It wasn't vindictive in a shouting, obvious way. It was quiet, It was effective. Ethan didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. He only felt free. For the first time in months, he slept without the weight of suspicion pressing on his chest. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Divorce proceedings, shared finances, the endless social whispers. But for the first time, he felt the kind of clarity that comes only when you remove a toxic presence from your life. Laura was gone. Marcus Reed would be gone soon, too, legally and socially. And Ethan could finally breathe. Ethan didn't rush. Divorce proceedings moved slowly, as they always do. But Ethan approached them like he approached the rest of his life now, deliberately, without emotion clouding his judgment. Laura's lawyer tried to negotiate, citing her years of work at the nonprofit, her supposed stress and emotional hardship. But Ethan remained calm, methodical. He wanted only two things: a clean break and a sense of finality. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and stale coffee. Ethan waited in the hallway, hands folded, watching couples and families navigate their own tangled disputes. When Laura appeared, dressed sharply, her face pale but composed, he didn't flinch. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly, not daring to raise her voice. "I don't think so," Ethan replied evenly. "This is long overdue." The divorce was finalized within months. No custody disputes, no drawn-out battles. Laura walked away with what she could claim, and Ethan walked away with freedom. An invisible weight lifted from his shoulders. But the real change wasn't legal. It was emotional. For weeks after the divorce, Ethan forced himself into a routine. Early morning runs through the quiet streets of their neighborhood, coffee at the small cafe near his office, long hours at work, not to escape, but to rebuild. He refused to check social media obsessively, refused to dwell on what Laura had done, refused to let himself slip back into anger that would only consume him. One Friday evening, he went to a bar near downtown with a few old friends. Music played softly, laughter filled the air, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself a genuine smile. "You look lighter," said his friend Josh, nudging him. "I am," Ethan said, taking a slow sip of his drink. "I feel finally in control again." Control. That was the word that mattered most. For too long, he had been adrift in suspicion, anger, and betrayal. Now he had control, not over Laura, not over her choices, but over himself. Meanwhile, news from Laura's world trickled in. The nonprofit had completed its investigation. She was let go, officially cited for misrepresentation and ethical violations. Marcus Reed had quietly stepped away from the board, his reputation slightly tarnished but not destroyed. The scandal had been subtle but effective, like a slow burn. Ethan didn't rejoice publicly. He didn't need to. Justice had its own rhythm, and it had come quietly. Ethan's life moved forward. He rented a small apartment in a quieter part of town, rearranged his furniture, started cooking for himself, and even joined a local running club. Each small, ordinary act became a reclaiming of autonomy. One night, while walking home from the cafe, he passed a window where a couple laughed over coffee. For a fleeting moment, he felt a pang, not longing, but a recognition of the life he once imagined. Then he smiled, a real smile, because he knew he could create a new life, one built on honesty and self-respect rather than pretense and betrayal. Weeks later, he found himself driving past a familiar hotel, the same one where he had seen Laura and Marcus together months ago. He slowed down, glanced at the building, then exhaled deeply and drove on. The ghosts of that life didn't vanish entirely, but they no longer haunted him. He had acknowledged them, faced them, and moved past them. That was enough. Ethan didn't rush into new relationships. He didn't need to. The intimacy he had lost with Laura had taught him the value of trust, of awareness, of paying attention not just to words but to actions. He knew he could never ignore the signs again, but now he also knew he could survive them. Months later, he returned to the gala circuit, but as a volunteer for a small local nonprofit he genuinely cared about, one with no corporate sponsors, no hidden agendas. The events were smaller, quieter, more genuine, and in the midst of it all, Ethan finally felt at home. One evening, as he handed out programs for a charity concert, he noticed a woman approaching. She smiled warmly, shook his hand, and thanked him for his help. He smiled back, politely. Nothing more. He realized something then. Closure wasn't dramatic. It wasn't revenge or confrontation. Closure was quiet. It was simple. It was the ability to live in the present without being chained to the past. And for Ethan Miller, that was everything. He walked away from the venue that night, the winter air cool against his face, and finally, truly free.